Hello and welcome to State of the Workplace 2022. I'm Christine Gannon. I'm here with Juliette Burgess, and we are excited to host a series of webinars that will happen throughout the year that are focused on helping leaders in the new workplace and how the workplace has evolved over the course of the pandemic. We're just here to provide some insight and best practices related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as how to really connect with employees and the employee experience that's underway, especially right now during these times. I'm CEO of Brightworks Consulting and Solutions, and we specialize in helping organizations utilize best practices and the latest research to improve not only their culture, but their practices. And I'm here with Juliette Burgess. Excited to have you with us today, Juliette.
Thanks, Christine. I'm Juliette Burgess. I am a labor and employment attorney. I am also the founding partner of the Burgess Law Group, and my practice specializes in helping small businesses with all types of workplace issues. We work closely with HR. We work closely with teams like Brightworks Consulting, and our goals are really to help leadership with some of the easy practical things that come up: policies, procedures, paid time off, and some of the harder issues that are a little bit more difficult to talk about, like sexual harassment, discrimination, retaliation. So sometimes we come in proactively and we're part of the brainstorming problem solving team, and other times we're brought in after the fact to defend the company. And either way, we love working with great companies, and we're very, very excited about this partnership that we're doing with Christine Gannon today.
So we just want to take a minute and thank our sponsors. We have some very generous sponsors who are sponsoring this webcast series over the course of the year. Best Companies AZ, which is a local Arizona company, the top company in Arizona for employer branding, and also Dolgen Consulting. So thank you to both of our sponsors. And again, we designed this series and really coming together as two business owners, really looking at the evolution of the workplace and how can we provide some content as well as best practices that support what's happening in the workplace. And we have additional webinars coming in the coming months, so look for our invitations on LinkedIn. So Juliette, where should we start?
Well, Christine, it's funny you should ask. I was going to ask you a question. Since, why is it, and I know there's so many different things we're going to get to talk about today, but why is assessing a company's culture so important?
That's a great question. And I think we should start with a common definition in terms of what is company culture, because I know just in our conversations, we found that people think differently about what culture is and who owns culture. So the formal definition, as defined by a lot of reputable organizations, is that it really is the collective behavior of all people of the organization, and it's formed by the vision, the norms, and the beliefs, the environment of the organization. And it does include the mission of the company, but it also includes the values, but probably most importantly, the practices that a company employs. And I think it's really important to note that it's a living, breathing organism, and it's not owned by anyone. It's really not owned by the HR department. It's not owned by an individual. No one's really responsible at the individual level to create it, but it is continuously influenced by the individuals in the organization, and really every employee contributes. So that is the definition that we're working with. And the assessment really helps an organization understand what the culture is, what the temperature of the culture is, but also measures it. So there's meaningful data behind it. And the survey, really important that the right questions are asked. I can't tell you how many organizations we've talked to where the questions were so vanilla. They were very much not focused on the employee experience and what's happening in the workplace. So the survey is a very important tool to the assessment and really understanding what's happening in our organization.
And you mentioned a survey. What are some other ways that companies can assess what the culture, as you defined it, is at their company?
So one of the best practices that we use in our organization is a maturity model. So we not only measure culture, but we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion across the organization. We look at it from a data perspective in terms of what's the current state of the pipeline of talent right now in the organization, or what is the ratio of men to women leaders, or what does the exit look like for people? Like how many people are leaving the company? So we look at data, we look at practices and policies from an HR perspective, and then we also look at the employee experience. So what's happening for employees? What are they most concerned about? Are their workplace needs being met? Do they feel like if they have questions related to working hybrid or family and medical leave or dealing with elderly parents and how to handle that in the best way possible, do they feel like they have company support to do that? Given the current state of recruitment and retention, the assessment is incredibly important and the ROI is significant. If you only do an employee survey, you can, many companies do, and we also do that, and it gives you enlightenment into that. But I think you're missing a couple of things. You're really missing looking at the policies and practices that are underneath that employee experience, and the data doesn't lie. Right. So the data is super important. So the cultural, a cultural assessment or a DE&I assessment or a holistic assessment really gets to the answer of a question that's super important, which is what we say we are truly what we are as a company? Is what we say we are really what we are? Is what we say we're doing really what we're doing?
Yeah, and I think that transparency is so important. And I'm curious in your experience, but in my experience, if I walk into an organization and I say, how would you describe the culture here? And nobody can answer the question, that's not a good sign,
Yeah,
right?
right.
You kind of want there to be an obvious vibe, so to speak, that everybody collectively feels and believes, and is sort of the pulse of the organization, even though everyone serves different roles there.
Right. There's also an element of safety, right? So when you come into an organization that looking for that safe space to speak about the culture or to raise concerns about the culture, which is why an assessment really works when it's anonymous, because employees feel free to share their experiences.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with something you said earlier in terms of what questions to put on the survey, because I think we saw last year a lot of really difficult conversations taking place in the workplace, and people recognizing that it is sometimes hard to have conversations about some of these subjects, and without making the situation maybe worse than it already is, when they're actually coming from a place of wanting to improve the culture. So it sounded like what you were saying to me is a survey might be a place where you could ask some of these really hard questions about, for example, working from home or diversity or inclusion, things like that.
Absolutely. Or do you feel like management supports you? Do you feel like your leadership is supportive and actively working to create an environment that is inclusive or that is diverse, right? So we're working with several clients right now who are telling us, you know what, we don't see diversity and inclusion in our organization. And how can we shift that? How can we help our leadership team shift that? And that's a great question. That's a great question to start with. And
Yeah.
something that you and I talked about is culture and influencing the environment that employees work in, and starts at the top.
Absolutely. And I know we want to be respectful of everyone's time today. So, if we could leave you with one thing, I think what Christine and I both feel really passionately about is that a lot of times the term culture kind of has a soft connotation to it. It's not, gross revenue. It's not a bottom line number for the company. It's not necessarily determining who's laid off or whether there's a promotion or hiring somebody. So sometimes it's kind of a soft concept that is loosely thrown around, and not necessarily given as much attention as it could be or should be given. And one of the things that we were hoping to talk about in our last seminar, which in light of the State of the Workplace 2022 was postponed because of COVID-19, is retention and diversity, and how to hire and retain a diverse workforce. And what we see a lot of the times is by the time that the person has made the decision to leave the company, it's too late, right? They've already experienced something in the culture or made the decision that the lifestyle at the company doesn't match up with their values. And unfortunately, a lot of people are leaving. We could talk about the great she session and
Right?
the great, resignation. All morning, but as companies are trying to recruit and trying to retain a lot of really qualified candidates, I think it's just so important that they focus on their culture and realize that that is a key tool to recruiting and also retaining really talented people.
The other thing for us to consider and to share is that this isn't overnight, right? Culture doesn't shift, culture doesn't improve, it doesn't transform overnight. And so the assessment is another way, and a survey is another way to understand, where do I need to make some changes? If it's related to recruitment and retention, what are some things that I can do to improve culture and improve my culture to attract talent and retain talent? But I'm probably not going to be able to do that overnight, right? So implementing policies and practices and looking at best practice, it really is a process in itself, but the assessment is a great place to start. And it's a great place to look at culture. And it's a great place to figure out, what's my roadmap? How will I close these gaps?
Yeah, and once you do, once you're able to kind of get your arms around what the issues are and where you want to improve them, one of the things that I spend a lot of my time doing is updating employee handbooks and drafting policies and procedures that relate to some of these cultural issues, everything from telecommuting to as Christine mentioned, family medical leave. But sometimes, there's things that are as simple as, what is our company's position in terms of talking to the press? What is our company's position about alcohol at social events? What are we allowed to say and do on social media as employees of the company? And how we portray ourselves as employees of the company. So once you're able to take that first step of doing a survey or another means of assessing what the culture is, and you're able to define what it is that's important, that's maybe missing, or maybe is already there, but you just want to solidify and communicate to everyone so that everyone can be on the same page, and it's well known that this is what the company's position is on these issues. That is certainly something that we'd be happy to help you with. And we also do a lot of trainings, and I know Christine does too. Particularly, we do harassment trainings and diversity trainings where we bring in small groups, sometimes of just leadership, and other times it's departments. And we have some of these difficult conversations that help shape the culture of an organization. And I think a lot of times when individuals just have an opportunity to feel heard and seen, and know that their perspective has been communicated and is being taken seriously, even if they don't get everything that they want, even if there's a collaboration and a compromise in what the final policy looks like, it goes a long way towards improving their culture.
And I think, to add on to that, the worst thing a company could do is do an assessment and not do anything with it. Because to your point, if employees feel like they've been heard through a survey or an assessment, and then they don't see any action or change after that, that's really damaging to a culture that might already be fragile. So it's really important and not difficult to do the survey, to do an assessment, understand what the maturity of your culture is, maturity of your DE&I strategy is, and we can help you put together a roadmap. Juliet and I have entered this amazing partnership to support organizations in terms of what they need related to culture, related to DE&I. And so we're just excited to be here to share great content, best practices, and look forward to hearing your feedback as well.
We hope you'll be able to join us for our next conversation. And we do have a few more. We're hoping maybe even our last one we'll be able to do in person this year. But in the meantime, if you have questions or comments or ideas, topics you want to talk about with us, feel free to message us through LinkedIn or reach out to us. And we look forward to helping you navigate your culture.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.